Hey everybody, welcome back to Raven Said. It's time for another build. This time we're going to build a giant oak tree, a great oak, in honor of the Druids. So I've got some cut dead wood from a mountain laurel. We're going to piece this together, put some big clumps of foliage on here. Why don't you watch over my shoulder and let's get something built. Alright, let's get into this build. So I've got to find a way to attach this tree to my foam. I ended up using a 1-inch deck screw, so I'm just going to make a little reference mark here, get the shape of the base that I want, and cut that out with a hot wire cutter. And then I was thinking maybe some stacked flagstones around the trunk of the tree. So I'm just going to drill a little pilot hole here in the bottom of the main trunk. This mountain laurel is pretty dense. It doesn't split too easily, so it's pretty tolerant of having a screw driven up in there. That ended up being very tight, so that worked out. Then I wanted to attach this other branch. Mountain laurel bifurcates usually, so I wanted to add a couple other branches in there. I had a little pin that I just put in there for added support, and a little bit of hot glue. And then that terrible looking joint we're going to cover up later on. I'm going to use a craft knife here. I don't cut myself, so don't worry about that. I just wanted to give the base a little bit more interest. Cut in a couple different levels. So I'll just whittle away until I get the shape that I want. I suppose you could do this before attaching the tree, but I kind of liked having the tree there for scale and reference. I'm just going to touch up the edges here with a wire brush. That kind of gives it a little striated look, kind of a stone look. Go over the factory surfaces with some rolled up aluminum foil. Gives it a nice dimpled surface. And I just took those wafer thin pieces of foam and broke them away with my fingers and got some nice looking stones there. I'm going to stamp some runes into this little runic monolith here. Hagalaz, that's my favorite, and then Othala. And you could use those, incorporate that into a game or a story or whatever you wanted to do. I ended up cutting the base of this stone on a bias, so it would kind of have a ruined leaning look there. It's a little fragile, but not too bad. We'll stiffen everything up and coat this piece with Mod Podge and black acrylic paint. That'll give us our shadows for our dry brushing, and also helps to cover up that pink color. And I'm always hesitant to paint over top of real wood, although real wood ends up not looking quite right, in my opinion, in scale. So just going to go over this with some dry brushing, medium gray, light gray, and then parchment, which is almost a white color. And I'm going to do that on the tree as well. If you take a walk in the woods, you're going to see brown trees, usually conifers. At least in deciduous forests, you'll see a lot more gray. So poplars, oaks, that kind of thing. So I'm kind of going with the great oak theme here. Just a touch of brown in there to kind of help it make sense to the eye. A little bit of green. That orangish color was cinnamon. That was the name of the color. Just a cheapo craft paint. I'm going to get all this dry brushing done, then we'll do some of our washes. The first wash I'll put on the trunk. That's a sepia wash. I actually ended up using this all over the whole piece, but I've been watching a lot of videos on miniature painting, especially like the slap chop method, where you have this really light primer, and then you're going over it with speed paints, these thin down paints. So kind of the same process here with the washes. I think it gives it a pretty good look. And that same sepia wash, it's just a mixture of acrylic ink and water, and a little bit of true green mixed with water. Give everything a nice verdant, mossy look. I always like a little splash of color here and there, so that Vallejo Rust Wash works really well in there. Time to add a little bit of flocking to our flat surfaces. I'm just painting on some regular PVA glue wherever I want the flocking to stick down, and I'm using my homemade mix on this, just a mixture of preserved moss, yellow flower flocking, and a little bit of chopped up lichen. So it kind of gives it a leaf litter look underneath. And just gonna press that down a little bit and make sure it sticks to the glue. Knock off the excess and it's good to go. Then we're gonna need to add some foliage in here. This is where we really get in and hide our mistakes. Kind of blend everything together. There's a little seam there at the base of the tree trunk. Where I added that branch, you can see the glue joint. So we're gonna add a little bit of vines up in there to kind of help blend that in. If you wanted to get really creative, you could use an epoxy putty like green stuff and just sculpt in the joint between the two. With my shaky hands, I don't know, I kind of like the hot glue and foliage method. Works for me. Kind of looks like Spanish moss. So this is how I build the foliage on my trees. Nothing new here. I mean, everybody does this, but a little hot glue and then jam a piece of preserved lichen on there. Sometimes there are pine needles in there. You got to pull those out. They're not to scale. And this big branch I did with 2 pieces of lichen. Stuck it one on top and then flipped it over and put a piece of lichen on the bottom. So if you need a really big clump, that's a good way to do it. You can just piece it in around the branch. And one more little clump right there. Perfect. Now we've got to put some flocking on the foliage. So I spray all the lichen with a matte varnish. Very careful not to get it on the rest of the terrain. And then I'm going over with fine flocking. And that adheres pretty well. I had one little spot there on the top that didn't look quite right to me, so I just hit it with a little bit more of that polyurethane. And then it's good to go. Do a little bonsai treatment. Sorry, not bonsai. That's something different. Anything that's hanging down that doesn't look quite natural to the eye, I'm just going to give it a little trim. And then a coat of polyurethane and it's ready to go. Let me spin it for you. There it is, the great oak. The Druids have been taking care of this tree for centuries. It's a little worse for wear. Must have gotten struck by lightning. Appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching another video. Got a couple of pictures here for you. There's our Druid. Thanks again. See you on the next video.
That's a wrap, folks.